Oh, the joys of being out on the water, but every once in a while we'll find ourselves in a little bit of mischief and needing just a little bit of help, just like some of the people we'll see in this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. Our first story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to Marina del Rey, California, where we're going to see a risque rescue. That's right, not a risky rescue, but a risque rescue. When a few friends set sail out of Marina del Rey on an afternoon sail, and they spotted a pod of dolphins out in the distance, and the group decided to follow the dolphins, when all of a sudden they saw a hand come floating out of the water. The crew wound up going over to investigate what this was and found a lady floating on her back with no clothes on, out 2.5 miles offshore. The crew originally tossed her a life preserver, but she was too weak to use it, and they wound up tossing a buoy out to her and pulling her toward the vessel. Once they got her on board, they did find out from the lady she'd actually been floating offshore for almost 12.5 hours. She decided the night before to go do some skinny dipping, and a rip current caught her and pulled her out, and she wound up stuck offshore. Authorities were called, and they were able to get her assistance as they came out to the sailboat. This crew actually credits the dolphins for the rescue, as they mentioned if they would not have been following the pod of dolphins, it's highly unlikely they would have found her. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to be another cargo ship struggling to get in port, but not due to lack of space. This time, this cargo ship gets grounded. This is the Panamanian registered vessel Rise and Shine, which was sailing from China's Ningbo port when it ran aground near the Russian city of Nakhatka. The vessel was caught in a large storm off the Russian coast, reportedly with 33-mile-an-hour winds and 8-foot-plus seas. Shortly after the vessel became grounded, the crew radioed the Russian Emergency Ministry requesting assistance. Russian authorities showed up and reported the operation was complicated by hard-to-reach location along with high seas and winds. Initially, Russian emergency services dispatched a rescue vessel, but it was later determined that the only way to actually rescue the 14 Chinese crew members who were on board the vessel was going to be an airlift. So the Russian authorities dispatched an Mi-8 helicopter, and the Russian emergency services later reported that more than 60 people and 20 pieces of equipment were involved in the rescue, but all 14 crew members were successfully transferred to shore and no injuries were reported. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to bring us back over to the United States, where this past week the Dream-class vessel Carnival Breeze was sailing back to its home port in Galveston, Texas, when the ship all of a sudden received a mayday call. The cruise ship immediately altered its course and eventually found the sailing vessel that initiated the mayday call in the Gulf of Mexico. Crew members lowered one of the lifeboats from the cruise ship and rescued 3 people and 2 dogs off the sailing vessel. The passenger on board the cruise ship who captured these video images of the lifeboat returning to the ship later stated that the captain on board the sailing vessel had broken his foot, which initiated the mayday call as he was no longer able to operate the vessel. Our next story to make the boating news this week is actually going to take us over to Norway, where this was the scene when authorities wound up having to battle a blaze on board a shrimp trawler this past week. Authorities, once they arrived, tried to extinguish the blaze but ran into an issue of an abundance of propane tanks on board the trawler that kept exploding, which caused the authorities to have to maintain their distance as they tried to extinguish the flames. It was reported by authorities as well there was only one person on board the trawler at the time of the blaze. That person did have to be transported to the hospital due to smoke inhalation. The trawler did wind up eventually sinking as it could not get the blaze put out due to the amount of propane on board and the explosions occurring. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to bring us back over to the US, but it's going to take us across the Pacific to the Hawaiian Islands, where this past week the merchant vessel Ariba was cruising approximately 90 nautical miles off the coast of Hawaii when one of their crew members all of a sudden fell ill and started showing signs of appendicitis. The captain on board the vessel radioed the US Coast Guard, letting them know of their crew member's issue and requesting an air medevac. The US Coast Guard, in response to the emergency situation, launched one of their MH-65 Dolphin helicopters from their Barber Point Air Station in Hawaii. The air crew was able to successfully bring the mariner back to awaiting emergency medical services on the island of Kauai. These images are always wild to watch for me though, but it's always a good reminder as well that the boys in orange are out there if you ever need assistance. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. If you ever see anything crazy happening out on your waterways, be sure to hit me up on Facebook or Instagram and let me know, and you might see your stories over here. Just like Hostra Hosavani, Canute Jacobson, Rhonda Brewer, and Legends of KTR did this week. And if you guys haven't already, go ahead and drop an anchor on the subscribe button here. If not, we're coming to steal your drain plug.